For the final talk, I would like to introduce the principal driver of a Martian vehicle, Bob Downs, who will introduce our final speaker.
Thank you, Bob. I'm very honored today to be able to introduce my friend, Bob Hazen, to you guys. I met Bob in the late 1980s when I was a graduate student at Virginia Tech, and my advisor took off to Australia for a few months in sabbatical, and he sent me up there to be babysat by the guys at the Carnegie Institution, and it was a beginning of a fantastic relationship. The Carnegie Institution is one of those think tanks. For those in Tucson, you've got Tumamoc Hill, where the old Ecology was invented. And for those, the saguaros, that's Carnegie giantea,
Can you get this
named after
correctly,
Andrew Carnegie's research labs.
Here.
And so Bob got a chance to, he got his degrees at MIT and Harvard, and then went to Cambridge, and then was able to go to Carnegie and became a staff member there. And they don't do, it's not a school, it's a research lab in Washington, D.C. But he was very interested in education and people like me coming in and finding ways to interact with the younger people. And so he became a professor at George Mason as well, which he does in his spare time. He wrote the science education policy for the president 1 year. He's on the board of NOVA, where he's involved in all these educational programs on TV. I've seen people coming up to him just saying, "I loved your videos." And he's just done a marvelous job at educating. And last year he won the Roebling Medal for the Mineralogical Society of America. That's the #1 mineralogist in the world. Though it's really a lifetime achievement thing. And Roebling, he funded the Mineralogical Society of America at the turn of the century and really influenced science in the United States and the world. And so, Bob Hazen, my friend, I'm really glad. Yep. Yep.
Wow. Thanks, Bob.
And he's also a co-investigator of the Mars rover project, too. We just can't be separated.
Wow, Bob, thank you. And what a thrill to be here. To be here again. This is, I think, one of my favorite events of the year, and I thank Rob for really the vision to organize something like this, to bring such an amazing array of speakers, and to be the last is a humbling opportunity. It's especially humbling because I love mineralogy, and what we've discovered in the last few months has changed my view of the science, and today I want to be able to share that with you, because I think we may be entering a new era of the way we think about minerals and the way we illustrate minerals. So there's a lot more about this. You can go on a website, dtdi.carnegiescience.edu, and see some of these amazing new ways of thinking about minerals using network analysis. But let me put this in context. For the last 10 years, we've been thinking about mineralogy using large data resources, thinking about the diversity and the distribution of minerals. That's the idea here. And there's sort of 3 themes that have emerged. 10 years ago, it was mineral evolution, this idea that Earth's mineralogy changes through time. And that was a rather qualitative, kind of a fuzzy idea, but it resonated with people. And as we began to think more and more about the diversity and distribution relationships, we came up with something called mineral ecology, which is a way of thinking about mineralogy and in a more quantitative way, what exactly is the distribution? And can we predict new minerals? That's one of the new ones we actually predicted, and maybe some of you know what it is, but I'll come back to that later. And third, and what I think is most exciting and brand new, I mean literally published August 1st of this month, is mineral network analysis, and a way of visualizing the richness of information that we now have about minerals. So I want to draw you into this world. That's sort of cool the way that happens. Okay, so why do we do this? There are some real scientific drivers. We want to document the diversity and distribution of minerals on Earth. That's something that collectors want to know. That's something that scientists want to know. We want to understand, why are the minerals there? Where are they? We also are very interested in comparing Earth with other planets and moons, something that Bob Downs and I are very much involved in. And we want to be able to predict new minerals, predict new deposits. You know, mineralogy has so often been just the luck of finding something in the right place and then exploiting it. But I think we can do better. I think we can predict in advance where to go to find those new specimens. Now, all of this relies on huge data resources that are large and growing. There are about more than 5,200 mineral species. You all know a mineral species is naturally occurring. It has a fixed, more or less, composition, and it has a regular crystal structure. So right now, there are about 5,300 or so different species of minerals with these unique combinations. Bob Downs is my hero because he started the RUF project. This is the database we all go to find out what are the official minerals that are out there. You can sort by chemistry, and also what we started with mineral evolution is you can now look up minerals and their ages. And Bob tells me, as of just this last couple of weeks, we have about 300,000 mineral locality age data that we can play with, that we can use to explore mineralogy through deep time. Of course, we're also tremendously reliant and grateful to Jolly and Ralph Mindat, where you have over 300,000 localities, and as of this point, more than 1 million mineral locality pairs. That's the kind of big data that we rely on. And for all of you in this audience who are involved in that Mindat database building, you know, we are just eternally grateful. That's a thing that allows us to do our work. And so we have 3 different things we're doing. Let me just briefly remind you about mineral evolution. You heard about this 3 years ago. But what we do is we look at minerals through time. The horizontal axis here is time, starting modern times here. That's 1 billion years ago, 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion years. And here you see, just for the first row, transition elements. That's iron, cobalt, zinc. There's about 9 of them. And copper, cobalt, there's all on there, and you can see some interesting trends. The 2 main trends that we've observed, the first one has to do with the supercontinent cycle. And you've already seen visualizations of this earlier today. When continents come together, you get mineralization. And so there's the formation of the Appalachians, and now you're going to see India coming up. It's going to collide with China, and so all those gemstones we heard about earlier forming at those mineral-rich zones where you get collisions. And we see through Earth history 5 periods when supercontinents formed, and we see pulses of mineralization. So that's one thing we've observed. A second one has to do with the increasing oxidation state of Earth's surface, and you've also heard about this today. The fact that very long time ago there was very little molecular oxygen on Earth, at least in the atmosphere and the oceans, and so you were more likely to form manganese minerals with 2+, and molybdenum minerals with 4+. These are the reduced states, but as you have more oxygen, you get more oxidized phases, and we can look at a measure of the total amount of oxygen. And indeed, this is work that's just coming out now by Dan Hummer at Southern Illinois University, where he's looked at manganese minerals through time. They're colored by the oxidation state. There have always been divalent manganese minerals, shown in red here. But you notice that only recently do you see the huge pulse of manganese 4+ minerals. And that's a consequence of oxygenation at the near-surface environment. So we have some real interesting trends, and we can understand that. Here's the kinds of graphical things we do, where we put lots of these together, and given the fact that we're showing redox state and different chemistries and age and the numbers of localities, there's 5 or 6 different dimensions all being shown in this one single graph. That's using big data. That's what we really like to do. Okay, a second question, this is mineral ecology, and that's the diversity and distribution, and can we predict minerals that have not yet been found? So this is a lot of fun, and what we found is that when you look at the distribution of minerals on Earth, it really is very similar to the distributions of words in a book. That is, there are a few minerals, there are a few words that are very, very common. A, and the when you're reading a book. But most words are rare, and it's those rare words, the ones that are only used once or twice in a manuscript, a document, a book, that gives you hints about the authorship, about the subject of that book. So those are the ones we want to look to, and that's true in mineralogy as well. So if you look at minerals, here's a graph that shows the number of localities at which a mineral occurs. And there are a few minerals like calcite that occur, of course, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of localities if we had a complete list. There are others that are pretty common. Even diamond occurs at hundreds of localities. But there are some minerals that are truly rare, that are known on Earth from only 3 localities. Bobdownsite, maybe it's 4 by now, but in any case, it's not very many. And there's the lone Hazenite at Mono Lake. So, but that's a distribution function. And you can plot this in a way which we say how many mineral species on the horizontal vertical scale occurred exactly 1, exactly 2, exactly 3 localities. In reds are model, and which matches the data in black pretty well. So that's a model. It's called the large number of rare event distribution. And the thing that's neat about that is mathematically you can convert that to what's called an accumulation curve, something that's been used in biology for 100 years. But mineralogists haven't. And what that allows you to do is extrapolate. So back in February 2015, when we published this, there were about 650,000 known mineral locality pairs. And at that point, there were 4,937 known mineral species. You can now extrapolate into the future. If you actually go to 1 million, we're exactly where we should be on this curve, which is really satisfying. But what we predict is that there are many more than 1,500 mineral species yet to be found. And we can start looking at subsets. One of my favorite is carbon minerals. So this is the same analysis done just for the 400 plus minerals of carbon. We estimate that there's still 145 carbon-bearing minerals left to be found. A lot of them are calcium or sodium carbonates. And so we can go out and look for them. And some of you may have heard about Dan Hummer and the Carbon Mineral Challenge. This was the prediction that we made, published in the early 2016, Carbon Mineral Ecology Predicting the Undiscovered Minerals. Then Dan began the Carbon Mineral Challenge, run by the Deep Carbon Observatory, of which I'm a part. And the idea is to go out and find some of these. You know, people are going to find the minerals anyway, but this is kind of just a fun way. You get a little plaque, and there's a website that describes it. And so there's that mineral I showed you earlier, Abelleite. It's the first one since we had the Carbon Mineral Challenge, and it's one that's specifically predicted in that paper. There's another one, Parasite L. I've specifically predicted this mineral to occur. There are things we didn't predict. One of them is tenunculite. Tenunculite's a curious mineral, and I don't know if you could read this, but tenunculite only exists when the excrement of a falcon bakes in the hot gases of a coal fire. Well, and I confess we did not predict that. But we did predict that there'd be maybe 8 or 10 organic minerals, and that's one of them. So this is a very exciting thing for us to see this occurring. I heard of a new cobalt mineral that we predicted, just discovered in China a couple of weeks ago. This is happening all the time now, and I think we're in a new era. Okay, so that's mineral evolution, mineral ecology. Those are things that are now sort of almost well established, even though they've only been around a few years. This is what's new. And new as of, as they say, 4 weeks ago is when the publication came out. Mineral network analysis. And what we realized using large data resources is that minerals sort of mimic social networks. Now, you may have heard about social networks. Social networks, for example, here's my research collaboration network. And you see a lot of individuals. Those are the circles. They're called nodes. And there are links between the nodes based on who has written papers with whom. And so this is a research collaboration node for the mineral evolution and mineral ecology work. Here's the Al-Qaeda terrorist network. It turns out that this mathematics has been highly developed by the NSA because what you want to do is identify the key nodes, and that's your target, not the little peripheral lines. And we'll see very similar patterns with mineral networks. So here's the paper that came out August 1st, American Mineralogist. Here are my co-authors and collaborators, and it's just an amazing group of people. We have geochemists, we have mineralogists, we have data scientists, just a whole range of people here. And what we've done is we've been looking at minerals as a series of networks. So each node in what you're going to see is a mineral species. When you have two minerals that exist in the same locality, they have a link between them. You form a network like this, and this allows us then to study mineral networks. Now, so where do minerals occur together? One example is a rock or an ore deposit or your favorite mineral locality. And what you'll find is a series of minerals that occur together commonly. And you therefore can make a table of these. One of the big jobs is building the databases. So what I've been doing is going to old petrology books. This is from the 1930s. Thousands and thousands of rocks listed in tables. This guy, Johannsen, it was incredible. He looked down a microscope. He did point counting on thin sections, often 1,000 points for 5,000 different rocks. He made tables like this, listing each rock, each mineral type for each rock. So each vertical column is a different rock. We tabulate that. We put it in this format. It's just an Excel spreadsheet with zeros or ones depending on which mineral is present or absent. And then you make a network. This is our very first network, June of 2016. Ahmed Alish, our colleague at RPI, helped us do this. There are 37 different minerals here. And what it shows you is these are rock-forming minerals in igneous rocks. And so what do we have here? There's granite, or one of the many varieties of granite. There's alamite basalt, doesn't overlap. There's nepheline syenite. And the amazing thing is every aspect of igneous petrology that's covered in Johannsen, that's covered in Harker's petrology or any of the courses we may have taken, is present in this diagram. So we're seeing all of igneous petrology illustrated in a single diagram. We can now show this in other ways. There are many different renderings of networks. So this is something called a multidimensional scaling diagram. And here we have quartz, topaz. They commonly occur together, so they're close together in the diagram. There's nepheline, and quartz and nepheline are never found together, so they're far apart. And you can look at this, you can see it in 3 dimensions, you can analyze it. There's much more embedded in here I wish I had time to tell you about, but this is a very exciting direction for discovery. Okay, so now we're going to look at a series of diagrams called force-directed networks. This is yet another rendering of that igneous mineral network. And here, 51 different minerals illustrated. Now, what we've done is each mineral is a circle, and the distance between the circles is like a spring. You have an equilibrium distance. If 2 minerals occur together a lot, the spring is very short and stiff. If 2 minerals seldom occur together, the spring is long and weak, and if they never occur together, there's no spring at all. And so what you're seeing here is a 2-dimensional representation of a much higher dimensional mathematical construct. And we look at this, and we can say all kinds of mathematical things about it. Now, I don't want to go into the details of mathematics and metrics of networks, but just to give you a way to look at this, because you've probably not seen a lot of these networks before, there are 3 aspects of networks I want you to look at and see if you can figure out when you see these. First one is called density. And when you see density, what you're basically saying is how many of all the possible links are actually connected. So we have some networks that are low density, some networks that are very high density. A second thing is called centrality. Centrality is the extent to which one node is linked to everything else. So like the big boss in the Al-Qaeda network would link to hundreds of other people. That would be a highly centralized node. And so we have highly centralized and more decentralized networks. And finally, something that's very familiar to all of us is what's called diameter, or that's the degrees of separation. You've heard this expression, we're all connected to everyone else in the world by no more than 6 degrees of separation. Well, it turns out in the mineral world, that's just about true too. We have some networks where the diameter is only 2, because there's one central node that's connected to everything. But in other cases, the diameter can be 5 or 6, and you'll see that. So when you look at the networks I'm showing you, think about density, think about centrality, think about this diameter or degrees of separation. So let's go back to this igneous rock network. You see sizes, different sizes of circles. The commonest minerals like biotite and magnetite are the biggest circles. Rare minerals are smaller circles. You see spacing that corresponds to how commonly or uncommonly the 2 minerals are found together. And the color in this particular case represents structure groups. So down at the bottom you see red feldspars and quartz. Up at the top there's orange. Those are the feldspathoids, which see they're pretty far apart. They don't occur together very often. And then there's other kind of minerals, the accessory minerals, the mafic minerals. And what you notice in this network, high density, right? Lots and lots of lines, everything's sort of tightly clustered together. excuse me, the low centrality because there are many, many different minerals, all of which can be central players. There's no one dominant central mineral. And it's got a very low diameter. It turns out magnetite's connected to every other mineral, so the diameter is 2. So let's take a look, and now we can play with this. If you go online to that dtdi.carnegiescience.edu, you can just basically put all of these on your computers, and you can manipulate this with the mouse. Just click on one of the nodes, see what it is, pull it apart. You see magnetite connected to everything in the middle there. And this is so much fun, I'll tell you. I mean, it's just like a game. You can learn tremendous amounts which minerals are connected to which minerals. Now, we can do this for all sorts of situations. Here, for example, is Earth, the Moon, Mars, and this is the asteroid Vesta. And as you may know, if you collect meteorites, the HED meteorites are thought to all come from Vesta. So we can compare the networks of these different worlds. And there's just a whole lot of interesting comparisons, contrasts. It turns out Earth seems to be unique in a number of ways, which may have to do with biology. Now, let's look at one of my favorite. This is 243 commonest copper minerals. And what we're seeing here is a force-directed network of copper minerals in which you see it's not quite as dense as that igneous. It's spread out more. It's got a little bit greater diameter and a little bit greater centrality as well because there are a few nodes in the middle. Now, in this case, we've colored according to chemistry. So in red at the top, those are all sulfides. And they're strongly linked together. They seem to occur together. In blue, those are oxides, carbonates, phosphates, things that have oxygen but not sulfur, and they're the sulfates in yellow. And this was a real surprise. Now, in many cases, in many mineral groups, you don't see chemical linkage like this, but it turns out in the copper minerals, extremely strongly linked by chemistry. So you have these clustering effects. And those clustering effects are not something that we tell the program. It just naturally falls out of the network, and we can learn things from that. Okay, so let's look at the copper. There is the most common mineral, chalcopyrite, of the copper minerals. It's linked to almost everything else. So the diameter here is 3. There's malachite. It also is linked almost to everything else, even though one is a sulfide, the other is blue. And you see how it distorts because the springs are being stretched and pulled, and it's trying to find an equilibrium position. It snaps back into place. But look at copper. One of the strange things about copper is it's linked primarily to the oxides and the sulfates, not to the sulfides. That was a surprise to me. But I guess if you're a collector of copper minerals, you probably realize that copper, the elemental copper, is rarely found with sulfides. I hadn't realized that until we did this network. I love this network. This is the network of the commonest chromium minerals. And look how different it is. You see, they're not all the same by any means. In this case, you have a very low density. The density is only about 1 in 20 of all the possible linkages shown here. We have a high diameter. The diameter is 6. So this is truly 6 degrees of separation from one end of this diagram to the other. And one of the interesting things is the colors are based on the way that minerals form. So here we have in orange, we have igneous chromium minerals. In green, we have the weathering chromium minerals. There are other metamorphic ones in blue and so forth. So this network is dominated by one mineral, and that's chromite, because more than half of all the mineral locality known observations for chromium are for chromites. There's crocoite. It's one of the weathering minerals, so it occurs over in a different cluster all of its own. And so you can manipulate this. It's really fun. As I say, chromite just dominates everything, and the whole network just deforms and distorts to it. You can do this yourself. This is fun to play with. You can, if you have a favorite element, you can go and you can explore it this way and figure out what links to what. There's crocoite. And it links very strongly to the other weathering minerals, but not so much to the igneous or metamorphic ones. Okay, so that's the two-dimensional force-directed networks, and that was fun, but now we've sort of gotten spoiled, and now we do three-dimensional networks. So this is really great. This is Dan Hummer. He's been working on more than 500 manganese minerals. This is the network. It's colored, as was the diagram before, according to the oxidation state. So +2 is colored in red as opposed to +4, which is in blue. And what you see here is something very dramatic. We're really amazed at this. I mean, if you've thought about manganese minerals at all, have you ever thought about how do they cluster in nature? Well, it turns out there's a whole group of manganese phosphates. They're always almost entirely divalent manganese, and they occur in pegmatites. Then there's another group clustered over here, the sort of second lobe or node budding off, that's the manganese metamorphic, and then all the rest of them, including almost everything that's yellow and blue, occurs down. So those are the 3+ and 4+ minerals. They occur down in this lower mass. That's the more common manganese minerals that we see as alteration products all over. There are also some really interesting phases that lie at the juncture. Cryptomylane, for example, links all three groups. So let's do a little movie now. You can do this. Again, you can play with this on the website that I told you about. Just download the movie and you can turn it around. You can zero in on individual minerals. You can find out where they are. You can zoom in on it and let's see where we okay, there's cryptomylane. See how it's right in the middle of the junction of the three, and then you can go around. I guess rhodochrosite's going to come up. But you can zoom right in on any one of these nodes, see what it's linked to. You can pull it and play with it and see how it's linked to other things. And this tells you something about how nature is organized, how minerals are organized. Wow, I love this stuff. It's really amazing to play with this. But wait, there's more. Because those were just single types of nodes. Now let's look at bipartite. Oh, these are so cool, bipartite diagrams. There's two kinds of nodes here. And you can intuitively imagine how this is used in medicine. The spread of a viral disease, the little black nodes could be airports, for example. You know, we fly here. I got a cold. I'm sort of coughing now. That was probably from Paris to Washington. So you could draw the linkages. And then all the little circles are colored. Those are individual people. And I guess the purple and the green are male, female. So you have lots of information in a bipartite diagram. Well, of course, you can do the same thing with minerals. Here is the bipartite diagram for carbon minerals. The carbon minerals are colored circles. The localities, and these about 300 regions around the world, are black circles. And so there's the commonest, and it's right down at the bottom of this sort of basket-like shape, calcite, connected to almost every locality. Also very common malachite and smithsonite and siderite and dolomite. Slightly rare witherite as we get farther up and out on this. And then in the periphery, there's hundreds of very rare carbon-bearing mineral, this one, lanthanum carbonate. So there's so much going on here. Look at this diagram again. Now look at the black circles. The size of the black circles tells you how many carbon minerals are located at that locality. So at the bottom here, you see lots of little teeny tiny localities. A lot of those have only calcite. So they're tiny, and they occur close to the calcite end. But up at the top, you see larger and larger black circles. That's because there are a few localities that have dozens or even hundreds of carbon-bearing minerals. One of them is the Kola Peninsula. Another one is Quebec. And look at the neat symmetry here. I can't reach up to show you, but you see here, these are all minerals that are tied only, they're unique to the Kola Peninsula. And then symmetrically, these are a group of minerals that are unique to Quebec. This is the La Poudrette Quarry, Mount St. Hilaire. And then there's this group of 7 minerals that are only found at the Kola Peninsula and in Quebec. Now, something that's emerging from this that is extremely fascinating and unexpected is the symmetry of this diagram. Look at how it just sort of flows outward like a flower pot. It's magnificent. But no one has ever seen a bipartite network like this. It doesn't work like this for people. It doesn't work like this for airlines or the spread of disease or anything else. No one's ever, what does this mean? It's telling us something fundamental about the distribution and diversity of minerals on Earth. This is a really exciting finding, and we don't understand it yet. And to understand it more, we now do something. Oh, yeah, let me just show you this because it's. You can go online. You can do this yourself. There's calcite. It really alters and sort of screws up the whole diagram, if you will. We go up and find rare things on the outside, and they're just connected to a few localities. There's McPhersonite, which, if I remember, is a lead carbonate sulfate, is it? Yeah, I think so. And then I think I click on those two. Now they've sort of been distorted, they've come close together, but look at the symmetry up here between, there's the Kola Peninsula, there's the 7 that are tied to both, and then we're going to come back to Quebec now. Come on over to Quebec, there it is, and now you pull Quebec aside and it distorts that whole group. So there's huge amounts of structure in these diagrams. There's a vast amount of information. Remember, we're talking about, if you take all 5,000 minerals, 300,000 localities, 5,000 mineral species, more than 1 million mineral locality pairs. All that data can be embedded in one diagram like this. And furthermore, you can have all the metadata. You can click on each one of these nodes, and you can have as much information embedded. You can go straight to the MinDat page, for example. So the idea of using this to explore coexistence, I think, is huge. And now we have a 3-dimensional bipartite network, because we wanted to see if that symmetry, the U-shaped bowl flower pot symmetry, extended to 3 dimensions, and it does. And to me, this is one of the most spectacular things we found. It's a little hard to see at first without rotating it. In gray now, those are the localities. In colors are all the carbon-bearing minerals. And we can go and we can rotate this, and you see how there's this core. It's sort of like a jellyfish polyp or something with these radiating spines, and in the core of that jellyfish are all the really common carbon minerals. And you can explore this, you can move into it, you can spend hours on this. Whatever your favorite element, whatever your favorite group of minerals, you can do this kind of exploration. And there's calcite in the middle. Okay. That's network diagrams. And if you were like me, you may be thinking, well, that's sort of pretty or kind of curious, but what good is it? Is it just a lot of interesting drawings you can play with, like a video game? Well, I think there's much, much more here, because what we're seeing is a visual representation of virtually the entire mineral kingdom. Indeed, everything we know about mineral localities, coexistence, diversity, they're embedded in these diagrams. So networks embed information which you don't explicitly put in when you're making the network. When I was making the network for the copper minerals, I was not telling the program whether or not there were sulfides or sulfates or oxides, but it falls out. When I was making the network for chromium minerals, I wasn't saying these are igneous, these are metamorphic, these are weathering products. It falls out. And there's other things as well. And one of the most important ones is time. I'm also going to tell you about the aspirations for the future, but you're going to have to wait for that. That's called affinity analysis. Let's look at what's embedded in these diagrams. Now, as I say, all we have here is copper minerals in which we have coexistence pairs or groups of copper minerals at one locality, at Bisbee, Arizona, or at Kola Peninsula. And what we find is that they cluster automatically by sulfides, oxides, sulfates. That means that embedded in here is an axis of chemistry, from sulfides that are as far away from oxygen as they possibly can be to oxides that are as far away from the sulfides as they can be. That's inherently in here. There's things we can learn from that we might not have already known. And there's also an axis for the activity of sulfur. That is the chemical reactivity of sulfur from very low to very high as you go across this diagram. But what I think may be the most exciting thing is the axis of time. I'm interested in mineral evolution. I'm interested in minerals in deep time. It's really hard to tease out some of that information. But to give you a sense of how time plays a role in networks, let's look at fossils first. Here's a network of all the major families of animals through the last 540 million years. If you think about Earth's history, life's history over the last 540 million years, there was a period in the early period shown in blue there, the Cambrian fauna. And then there was an explosion in what's called the Paleozoic fauna, but a pinching out, and then the modern time where you have the Mesozoic fauna with the dinosaurs, and then most recently the modern fauna with various kinds of mammals and so forth. And when you look at this diagram, it forcefully, you see that even though no time information at all was put into making this diagram, there is an axis of time through here, from the most ancient to the most modern. And that's obvious because it's an evolving system. So things that were early were together, and then they evolved to the next things and the next thing. But you also see mass extinction events in the network. We're not telling the network there's a mass extinction, but it falls out. As many of you know, one of my favorite hobbies has been collecting trilobites. Here is a brand new network produced 2 weeks ago of the trilobite evolution. The most ancient trilobites are things called olanellids, the Redlichia. They're shown in red at the far end. That's the lower Cambrian, middle Cambrian. There are also a bunch of tychoparids from that period, hundreds and hundreds of different genera of those. As you move into the Ordovician, some of those beautiful St. Petersburg samples, you see the Asaphids, and then Siluro-Devonian, you get the Phacopids. Late in that period, you get the Lichids, and finally, the very tail end, shown in blue here, the only thing that survived into the late Carboniferous and into the Permian were the Proetids. There is a powerful arrow of time built into this network. No time information was given in making this network. It was only which families of trilobites, which genera live together in a particular rock. Okay, even more abstract. Our bodies are filled with proteins. Those proteins do chemical operations that are critical. Some of them are more ancient, some of them are more modern. We have microbes that have lots of proteins. Jana Bromberg at Munich said, let's make a network designed only to show how similar or different a protein structure is. A protein is a molecule that folds up and has a shape and may latch onto something. And if two proteins have similar structures, they occur close together in this diagram. If they have very different structures, they lie far apart. That's the only information that goes into this, the structure of the protein. She then, after she made the diagram, she said, okay, now let's color the diagram based on which transition metal is most commonly used to facilitate that protein's work. Because virtually every protein, especially things called oxidoreductases, have a transition element. And all the iron ones cluster here. In the middle are manganese ones. That includes the photosynthetic. And here's copper ones. And it turns out that geochemists tell us early in Earth history there was tons of iron in the ocean. Later on, manganese became more available, and only more recently, as copper became available, there is a timeline built into the protein evolution diagram, even though no one knows what the timing of these proteins might be. This is a powerful discovery. And so let's look at a mineral network. And here I've colored these nodes by the age of the earliest known occurrence. So that in red are things that are more than 4 billion years old. That means they occur in meteorites. And as we go up the spectrum of color, you see younger and younger phases. And look at that diagram. Do you see the spectrum? It's there. There's a time axis in this network. No information about time was used. In fact, there's thousands of localities here that are younger, but this has to do with just the earliest appearance, and there's a time axis. That's extraordinary. That's exciting. We are going to learn things from these networks that we never knew before. Last point, and I think this is so cool. Have you ever wanted to know if there's a locality out there where your favorite mineral exists? Maybe a gemstone of some sort, or maybe something more common, but you just particularly love that mineral, wurtzite or sphalerite, and you want to see where it's never been found before. Or maybe you've got a favorite locality and you want to say, what am I missing? What mineral should be here that I haven't found yet? I think we have a way of finding this. And it's called market basket analysis. More generally, it's called affinity analysis. And you all have been exposed to this, whether you like it or not. And a lot of you may not like it. Because that's the way that Google or Amazon or Yahoo or Netflix targets you and says, you bought so-and-so, therefore you're going to like so-and-so. Because what it says is if you've got a certain group of things that you like, then it knows other people who've bought similar groups of things and knows what they like, and it does this huge analysis of hundreds of millions of data points to come up to a recommendation for you. So recently I was on Amazon, I was buying books, I was looking for some books in astrobiology and some other things, and it just immediately pops up and says, oh, you recently viewed these items, maybe you'd like to buy these books as well. How did it know? It used market basket analysis. Netflix. My wife Margie and I were thinking about maybe we should watch Homeland, and it says, well, the average person thinks it's 4.3 stars, but based on your likes and dislikes, you're going to get 4.7 stars. So you should go out, and if you liked Homeland, here are the other things you should go out and rent. Okay, we've all been there. We've all seen that. But by golly, the exact same mathematics applies to minerals. It's no different at all, not even in detail. You can use the same algorithms. And what that means is if you have a certain group of minerals at a locality, you're more or less likely to find other minerals because of similarities or differences. Sometimes it's the minerals that are present, sometimes it's the minerals that are absent. And our minds are just simply not clever enough to see that. Now, some very experienced mineral collectors will have a hunch. They'll see a particular combination of minerals and say, I've seen this before. And that's a really great way to do it, but the computer can go way beyond our own comprehension, and it will point us in new directions. So mineral networks reveal those mineral associations. And so I want to paint for you a vision of the future. How many people here have used virtual reality goggles? A few of you. Okay, so put on your virtual reality goggles. You got them on. And you're going to walk in to a mineral network, a 3D network. And you're going to say, computer, show me all 5,300 mineral species. And you sort of get yourself oriented. You start seeing these huge, there's the pegmatites over there in one cluster of minerals. You'll see over there, there's the metamorphic minerals over here. There'll be other clusters. You say, computer, color them by composition, or color them by paragenetic mode, or color them by hardness, whatever parameter you want. And the computer will just automatically change the colors of the nodes to suit you. Then you say, okay, computer, now just show me the copper minerals, and the other minerals will fade away, and just have the network for copper minerals surrounding you. You can walk up to nodes, you can touch them, you can find out what they are, you can explore. But you have a favorite minerals, you say, show me Gillespite. I really want to see Gillespite. And so the Gillespite node will highlight, and you can see all the links of Gillespite, other things. Now you say, gee, Gillespite, what are all the localities for Gillespite? Show me a locality. And then you say, okay, now I want to explore, and at this point, you're going to be linked not only to MinDat, but you'll have Google Earth. You'll be able to go in 3 dimensions and walk around that locality, see what it looks like, sort of see the surroundings, get yourself familiar with the locality. Maybe you'll have even some of your friends out there collecting with you. And you'll say, gee, Gillespite, I really like it. Let's think about it. What other minerals are commonly associated with Gillespite? And you'll see the network going out to these other rare minerals. And that's really neat. And then you're going to ask that question. You're going to say, where can I go to find more Gillespite? And the computer will tell you. And then you can go there and you can search it out. Now, this is the vision. It will happen. It is happening now. I don't know if it's going to be 5 years or 10 years or 50 years. It's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a lot of money. We're working on raising that money right now. We've got people who are being trained to do this. It is the future of mineralogy, and we can all be part of it. These mineral data resources are amazing. They provide insights. If we just use the right analysis, we use the right visualization tools, we can learn things that no one has ever known before. The analysis of mineral networks exemplifies this, and they're fun to play with too. I urge you to go to that website. This is a time of predictive mineralogy. This is a different age that we're entering. So please go to our website, take a look at this, download some of these various networks you can play with, and wait for more, because this is happening so fast. It's happening in real time. With that, I want to thank my colleagues, my research group, my funding agencies, and all of you for the opportunity to be here and tell you about this great stuff. Thank you.